Previously, we've seen how we've created a class and used those objects from that class all inside of our main CPP file. However, on any large project of any complexity, this is not realistic. Larger projects will be done by multiple people, and each individual person may be assigned a class. You can't lock up one file so one person can edit while you have a dozen others who are waiting to. Therefore, we'll often take our classes and remove them from our main file, putting them in separate files. That way, each team member can work on one or more files without requiring another person to wait for them. So let's take a look at our example here where we have a very simple class called Circle, and let's see how we would pull this out into an external file. Well, inside of Visual Studio, which we're using, it's very, very simple. Inside of another integrated development environment, or IDE, you might find a similar or slightly different method of doing this. So let's show you how we're going to do this. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here to my project. Choose right-click, click Add, and then I'm going to choose Class. Here I'm going to specify Circle, and notice it's going to create two files for me. If your IDE does not create these two separate files, you'll need to create each of them separately. We're going to leave the base class blank for now. We'll talk about what that's going to be used for later. And click OK. Now, right now, you're going to notice that there's an issue. And that's because we already have a class called Circle. So, in order to get around this, I'm going to make one minor modification. I'm going to cut out my class definition. I'm going to cut it out of my main file, go into a new empty file, and paste. I'm just going to use this as reference to be used later. Now, without having that Circle class defined, if I choose Add, Class, and specify Circle, now you'll notice that it doesn't give you any errors. This is Visual Studio's way of just making sure that there's no duplicate class definitions, which could cause some naming problems. Alright, so let's look at our main definition. It's here inside of our circle.h file. This is known as a header file, and we've imported header files before. Header files let us define where our classes are, as well as things like function or method prototypes. If I pull up my text file, there's several things you notice I'm going to want to bring in automatically. I want to specify that these are public. And then I'm going to add things like my double radius, as well as my constructors. Now, any additional methods, I'll go ahead and put here. I'm going to have my return type of double, get area, and I can progress like this. Any additional methods I want to create, I'll define them first here inside my header file. Now, in Visual Studio, what you'll notice is in your Solution Explorer, you have a section for header files, and you'll notice your circle.h file is there. And then you have your source files. You can notice them here. These are your .cpp files. However, if you come into your File Explorer, you'll notice that your circle.h and circle.cpp are in the same location. So Visual Studio is just organizing them for you. All the files are in the same location. Now, I want to access my circle.cpp file. If I select it once, you'll notice it's in the upper right-hand tab in my code editor. You notice it includes circle.h, and that's how it knows what the files are. I'm going to come down to my text file. I'm going to grab first my constructors. Now, when I put them in here like this, you'll notice that there's some issues. Visual Studio has given me some errors right off the bat, and that's because we haven't fully defined what these are. We need to reference that these circle constructors actually are referencing the circle class. The way we're going to do that is we're just going to specify our class name with 2 colons. When we do that, now it understands radius. Now it understands our circle constructor, and all the errors with my first constructor go away. However, my second constructor now gives me those errors, and so I'm going to specify circle here as well. And when I put the circle with 2 colons, define my class name that this constructor is going with, it understands it much better. Now, you might think that this is obvious. However, this is just a simplification process to ensure that we're always putting the right methods with the appropriate class. Because while a constructor is pretty obvious, other methods such as getArea may not. For example, I might have classes for a square, a rectangle, an oval, a triangle, and all of them might have a getArea function. However, all of those functions wouldn't matter if I didn't know which one I was writing the function for. So I have to specify my class name so that way I don't have any confusion. All right, so let's look at our last function, which is our getArea. And once again, it's not understanding what radius is. So therefore, I need to specify my circle. I'm going to do this in front of my function name, not the very first part of the line. The reason why it's in the very first part of the line for constructors, remember, a constructor doesn't technically return a data type. It is its own data type that's being returned. So when I use a regular method, I have to define my class definition, method name in this case, instead of the return type. Once I do that, the radius is now understood to be part of the circle class, and I'm returning the correct data type, and this is working. I'm going to save all of my files. I have one last change that needs to be made, and that's my main file. We put our circle class into a different file. We need to reference that file so that it can be used. So I'm going to go up where I have my includes and say include. And now I'm going to use double quotes. This is because this header file is a user-defined file, not something that comes with C++. What I'm going to use is I'm going to reference circle.h. I can select it from the list. If I am not using Visual Studio, I may have to type this in. As soon as I do this and save my file, you'll notice that my circle classes are now able to be identified so I can create my objects. And if I go and run this, here's my file with all the information, just as I was expecting. So that's how we pull out a class definition from our main file into separate class files. This is going to be much, much easier to use and work with in our future as we start to work on more complicated projects.